punch it. We should have done a different intro for this episode. Like instead of the sizzling, we could have done some like
dripping.
Your tea kettle
grinding.
going crazy.
We need some of this. Some of these sounds. There's no beans in here. It's not gonna work.
You just get some coffee slurping sound. Chris would love that.
Just get out of here. Get out of here. Welcome to the Okayest Cook podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whonsetler, joined by these clowns slurping into the mics. Today, I'm introducing them ranked by who I think owns the most coffee mugs. I myself am a notorious mug collector. But I think Andy Heiser has some mugs.
I have a couple.
And then I think Corey Cole has some mugs. And I think Colton has probably the fewest mugs.
Yeah. My wife has a lot of mugs. I have one.
Where do we
mug
draw
after
that
another.
line? Are your wife's mugs yours because you're married?
1,000%.
Having to hold.
No.
What's yours? Is
My
mine,
house,
what's
there
mine
are
is yours.
definitely mugs that I use. And there are definitely mugs that my wife uses. And we don't
Yeah.
really change. Like, I don't use her mugs, and she does not use mine.
So my wife likes to call me a hoarder because I don't like to get rid of things.
I'm borderline.
But I really
You're a
don't
collector.
try.
You're not
I'm
a hoarder.
collector, right? Yeah. But mugs are a thing I do enjoy. So
Yeah.
I have quite a few. What's funny though, I would be willing I'd be willing to count to see if I do have more mugs than you.
You might.
But because there are at least 2, if not 3 shelves dedicated to them. And and there's probably a box of them in the shed too.
Oh my
So
gosh.
Wow, yeah.
we have quite a few.
I have a rack that they are all set up. But that's our thing though when we go places
Is to
is
get a
we
mug.
get a mug.
Yeah.
It's just an easy thing. I know that's probably like way more than we need to, but and I've probably spent
cool.
some money on some mugs that I've never used. But
Yeah.
I mean,
That's cool.
that's our
yeah.
thing.
But there's probably a rotation of 4, maybe 5 that I
yeah.
actually use.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we have
definitely
shelves
your daily
But
mug
like,
for sure.
but and I got a T Swift one that makes the rotation quite a bit. I've got one from Ball State that was given to me for speaking up there that makes the rotation on an ongoing basis. And then there's some that I just like the shape of that make the rotation.
Dude, my all-time favorite mug
You fill at the table.
Yeah,
it is branded. We don't have to show that. But the Yeti.
Yeah.
It's a weird 14 ouncer, but like this thing, just
Yeah.
I can drink coffee pretty quick, but like it's ripping hot, like the whole 14 ounces.
This is my go-to.
That is a sick mug.
This
I like
is
that a lot.
Holly Forville out of Shelbyville. Holly Forville Ceramics made this. My wife has a like pink and blue faded one that's
That's
like
super
this.
cool.
I just loved how it kind of looks like a honeycomb, but it's just very
Yeah.
rugged looking. She did it. She killed it on
Yeah.
this.
Dude, do you know a guy named Cody Holiday?
I do. We went to college with him.
Yeah, we did.
We went to
Yep,
Iowa together.
So he does some beautiful handmade mugs. If you're into the
he
mug shop
partnered
things,
with Mud Love.
I think he helped launch it.
Yeah,
right?
he
Or
helped launch Mud Love. Yeah,
initiate all of that. But
his stuff is absolutely
I
gorgeous.
don't know his website. I should have looked it up, but I legit
So
just thought
Jess
about it.
is really, really good friends with Cody. Let me
Are you
pull it
looking
up
up
real
his
quick. Yeah.
Instagram? Yeah. He does some really, really cool mugs, and I would love to get some of his plates.
Yeah.
I think we could do some like Okayest Cook, like Zag ceramic plates, and I would that'd be super cool. On Instagram, _DOCHOLLIDAY. I'll put a picture up. We should have just done that in editing post.
Clay Table.
Claytable.com.
Claytable.com.
Yeah, Cody Holiday, sick, cool, local Indiana mugs. If you're into that kind of thing, you should be.
Those are cool.
Whether you're into it
You
or not,
should
yeah,
be.
you should own some cool handmade art that you
And his
eat and
his
drink out of.
prices are good.
They're good, yeah. For
He's-
handmade,
yeah, for
they're
handmade.
they're solid. But yeah, we're talking about coffee today, and in our nerdy minds, brewing coffee is cooking. It is an art form, and if you're not into coffee, I'm sorry. You know, maybe Corey can lead a tea episode later on because he does not do the caffeine anymore. right?
Yep. After having a coffee brand.
But the rest of us are like head and tails like into coffee. We love our coffee. And again, we're nerds about it. Like, we're really into specific brewing methods. We'll talk about that. We're super specific into regions. We'll talk about that. But like, coffee is life. And
Amen.
we're going to talk about it. We're going to break it down, and it's that important to us. We feel like to properly use coffee in your cooking, we feel like you need to understand coffee. And so that's what today's episode is going to be. And this could be an entire podcast by itself, just the topic of coffee.
For sure.
And we're going to cram it into one episode.
We're
So we are
try.
barely scratching the surface here. But these are our initial thoughts. These are our hot tips, maybe our go-to devices for brewing coffee. And hopefully you'll leave this episode knowing a lot more about coffee, or at least knowing a lot more about how we do our coffee.
And I would say brewing methods that are still approachable. Like if you're just someone that makes coffee in a pot and you want to do something a little different.
Everything we're going to talk about today is very manageable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some more costly than others, of course, but you'll have that on all sides of all the coins. But before we dive into coffee, what'd you guys eat this week?
I lit myself up with another Shank.
More
so
Shanks.
you guys have I brought Shank over here. I think when we were, there was the grind party. I don't know. We did when we were grinding the
grind
venison
party.
up.
Yep.
I had made Shank.
Is that that
a Shank?
hot,
Yeah,
hot
so
stuff?
you
Oh
can
my
thank
word.
our friends
still got
at
nightmares
Meat
about
Eater. Steve Brunella has a phenomenal Shank adobo type of recipe, and it is real good. But man, it is hot.
burns you up.
And so
You
I
feel
made
it going in. You feel it going
you
out.
feel it going out.
If you wouldn't have brought those donut holes,
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
have been going to the hospital.
It was hot, but the one I made this time around was actually less hot, different flavor profile. I almost brought it over
Probably a
for
good
you
thing.
guys, but I was out of rice, and it needs to have rice with it. So, but a little bit more of like a gravy based. It's a red wine based sauce that was the Shank was in. But one of my favorite things about butchering your own meat is getting a chance to use all of the meat that sometimes gets tossed away. And Shanks, if you go to your local butcher, while they'd love to help you out and let you take them home, they might let you take them home. For the most part, that part of the meat usually just gets thrown away. So
Well, I would say it's one of the things that people leave in the woods. Like
often.
outside of the liver and internal organs, but yeah, the shanks are probably number one thing
So,
left behind.
and it's one of my favorite things to cook because it's one of those where it's like kind of one of Colton's favorite things to do is to make people like the things that they say they don't like.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where people are like, oh, you make Shank? I'm like, wait till you try this. Like, it's so good. So very, very good, but on the hot side again. I thought I dialed it back, but when you let something roll for 3 hours, you throw a couple Thai peppers in there, it'll light you up, friends.
Yeah.
So-
You don't like that's not one that you share with people like to get them to
Oh
like
no!
it.
This is I almost brought it for you guys, and I
I
would
get
give
you.
it to anybody else.
That's funny.
Who's
Colton,
next?
let's hit it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did another pot roast. So, traditional pot roast this time. I wanted to bring it up and talk about it though because I've been experimenting a bit with the pressure cooker, which is
Okay.
kind of a new thing for me.
You
You know, those of you who watch cooking shows too, that's kind of the thing everybody uses when you're in a crunch, and it seems like people get really good results from it.
Yeah.
Mine did not turn out very good. You know, you see a lot of stuff where people pressure cook their meat in an hour and it's fall off the bone tender. Mine definitely did not cook long enough. It was dry. So it was a notable meal of the week, but not necessarily for a good reason. So, so here's a good
You
opportunity.
know, we need to talk about the failures more.
Oh yeah.
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 And you know, you get better by trying. So, you know, those of you that are listening that have used pressure cookers, you know, please write in, you know, give me some advice. You know, I did a 2 to 3 pound chuck roast for 55 minutes and thought it was plenty of time and it was not. So if you got any advice for me, I'm sure we'll do something later on, later season or something on pressure cooking, but yeah.
Yeah. I've not dabbled much into that outside of canning.
The idea of
So,
it is a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
So we did a garlic butter steak bites with Parmesan cream sauce,
Yeah.
with asparagus and shiitake mushrooms, and it's the first time I'd ever done those, and I'm super bummed right now because now I'm just now remembering I meant to bring the leftover fresh mushrooms that I did not use for you guys because we're leaving tomorrow, and I'm not going to use them. So
those will not hold very well.
One of you might need to come over to my house maybe and take those.
Break and entering for some mushrooms.
It's a whole. I mean, it's a whole box of them.
Oh man.
So I mean, it's a good probably 15, 20 mushrooms left.
Oh gosh.
So
Dang.
I apologize. I meant to bring those to you, but it was pretty amazing. And then I made some fresh bread to go with it.
The photos looked awesome. Yeah, looked really good.
Yeah, if you check our social media,
on Instagram.
It's on there.
Under our Instagram highlights, it's under Corey's cooking highlight reel. So check it out. Yeah, it looked delicious. Super awesome. So my meal of the week is again something else that I did not cook, but my uncle made it. He's kind of like one of the hunting mentors that I've had in my life. Just he's been hunting our whole life and cooking wild game my whole life. And he made some venison brats the other night that were just like top tier delicious. He used the Bearded Butcher's some kind of a jalapeno mix, and he threw in some cheddar, and it was like just the perfect level of spice. I like things a little warm, so I think that it could have used a little bit extra kick. But I think for average users, it might be like a little too much jalapeno. But dude, the spice level was just perfect.
Did he like grind the meat and everything himself?
Yeah,
Okay.
100%.
That's awesome.
Ground it, stuffed it. Yeah, Bearded Butcher jalapeno dust, and threw in some cheddar. And his thing is he smoked the brats instead of just freezing them raw. He smoked them, not quite 100% done, and then froze them. So then you throw them on the grill and finish them off, like bring them up to 160 or something. But dude, that smoke flavor like came through like money, and the spice and the crisp, and dude, it was on point.
That's what I think the meat church guys do that too. They
Smoke
smoke them first. Yeah. I need to try that sometime.
Just based off this one experience, I think that's the way to go.
Okay.
Right on.
Next time I do brats, 100% it's going to be smoked and then frozen.
Yeah, I've never had a venison brat.
Me either.
Solid. So bringing it back to Hank Shaw, as always, every episode.
Episode.
We're gonna do a brat specific episode, 100% at some point. But like Hank Shaw has the perfect sausage making. I think it's just a website, like a page on his site. But like Google Hank Shaw brats and use all of his tips.
And he walks you through everything.
Every single step. Like he will hold your hand through the whole process. And if you listen to him, 100% listen to Hank Shaw, like your brats will be phenomenal. If you do not listen to him, your brats will not be as phenomenal. They might be good, but they will not be phenomenal. So that's my hot tip.
Nice.
I liked it. So let's get into the beverage, America's drink of choice, coffee.
For sure.
Yes.
60% of Colton's blood.
Maybe 75.
Legitimately, I think it ranks higher than water in America.
I believe that.
Which is so funny because if you look at the rest of the world, I think they would all agree that we do not make coffee the way
we drink it the most.
We drink it the
probably
most,
don't make it the
make
best.
it the best.
No.
Yeah. Those mega corporations like Folgers, taking over most kitchens. We are not Folgers people for the most part here. If I had to speak for everyone, we like little roasters,
artisan roasters.
Artisan roasters.
I will drink whatever I can get my hands on. There.
Colton, Colton's the hot deck.
So this bag that I brought you is not going to last very long, is it?
That's going to be gone tomorrow.
Well, tell us what you brought, Corey.
So I brought some of my friends' Scars and Stripes coffee. I brought their downrange. So Scars and Stripes Coffee is a military re-entrance company based out of Oklahoma. Chad Watts is a really good friend of mine, and they created this company for men and women coming out of the military, and they don't feel like they have a fit in society. And so what Scars and Stripes does is they set these guys up with a coffee business to then go and sell coffee at trade shows and vendor shows and things like that. But they also keep the military mindset of how they're structured. in place to kind of help with that, transition, re-entrance back into civilian life. And so I almost exclusively, when I do drink coffee, only Scars and Stripes. For that reason, we also have a partnership with them. Chad and I have been great friends since 2019 when we got introduced, and they're doing some really amazing things. The next level is coming soon. Some
Super cool.
coffee containers for these guys that have physical brick and mortar businesses.
Nice.
And so, that's what I love about this coffee brand specifically, because of what they're doing for military veterans coming out of the military, especially coming from a military family. My dad just retired after 40 years in the military. And so, I love what these guys are doing. So if you've not heard of Scars and Stripes Coffee, check them out, scarsandstripescoffee.com.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely, the military is not my wheelhouse. At one point in my life, I thought I might have the courage to jump in and contribute, but I did not. So very thankful for those people who are, giving their bodies literally to, give us what we live with daily here.
Yep.
So really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much to all the veterans out there. But yeah, I'm excited to try this coffee. It smells fantastic.
It's almost got like an almondy, nutty
and
flavor.
it's from Brazil, so we can. I don't know where we want to start with here. I think we'll just hand the episode off to Andy and Colton, our resident coffee experts.
Yeah, and I want to take a moment to look wherever you are. Like, this is a great brand for sure. Check them out. But local roasters are awesome, and they're everywhere. Like, I love the Indianapolis coffee scene is a lot richer than people give it credit for.
We have some good coffee here.
And if you're in the area, the Indianapolis Coffee Club, Scott does a phenomenal job of shining some light on these little roasters that are they're doing because they really love it. So we'll talk about like coffee being cooking. This is a great example of where you want to see some heart and soul poured into some stuff here. Yeah. Like some of these little roasters, these little hole in the wall coffee shops, man, they really, really have love just in every single bit of what they're doing. So get out and look in your communities, no matter where you live. I promise you there's roasters around. Try some stuff. If you don't like it, talk to them about it.
I was going to say, talk to them. Yeah.
Because like coffee is like with wine. If you don't like red wine, for me, there's certain, like, once you find what you like, you probably can find a coffee that you'll like for a long time. So we were just talking about this a little bit off the air. So Colton, I'm going to have you just let's talk a little bit about, I don't want to go, we can talk forever about different regions and things like that.
Well, real quick, let's talk about your credentials. Like why should we listen to you?
Why should you listen to me? I drink a
lot of coffee, right?
No. So I would say prior to really taking cooking seriously and coming into like hunting and doing a lot of that, coffee is where I spent a lot of my time.
Nerding out
about the different kinds and different brands and the different roasters that are out there. And for me, it's less about, because I'm just like, I love them all. I can see why someone would like every one of the different regions. I have my favorites, right? Sure.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's probably not a coffee I've had that I didn't like because I could respect what it was doing.
So it's almost like the process.
But I love the process of actually brewing coffee. So I actually this is a constant
kind of
conversation and fight in my household is the amount of coffee makers that I own, and constantly trying to weasel in another one here and there. And
we'll touch on that a little bit.
Yeah,
there's
for sure.
So many different ways to make coffee.
Right, and so that's really where I think. Not only have I been brewing coffee for a very long time, but I've been brewing it in different ways. And so that's where a lot of my love comes from this. And I know Colton's got some credentials too, as far as because this man has not met a coffee I don't think he hasn't liked. So, but yeah, so I don't want to be the only one talking here, but Colton, tell me a little bit, go.
I'm going to jump in before Colton because my credentials are far less, I hope. I don't know.
Yours are more official, though.
I don't know. I wouldn't say official. So right out of school, I went to school for photography. And upon graduation, I thought, how hard can it be to start a business? So I tried to start a business, and it was slow. So one of my jobs right out of college was Starbucks, one of those big You've heard of Starbucks, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
I think you actually look. So
big
my very
corporation.
first job ever was at a coffee shop called Fisher's Coffee Company, and was put out of business
because of Starbucks.
I boycotted Starbucks for 3 years.
I'm sorry.
Because of
I'm not saying Starbucks is the end all be all. It is not. Their beans are mediocre in my opinion, because I know these smaller roasters and they know what they're doing. They care more, I think,
Yeah.
because they're not trying to do it at mass
scalability.
corporation.
Yeah, it's scale.
There's more love in the smaller roasters. But Starbucks did teach me about regions, and they taught me about different brewing methods. And because of Starbucks, like I've fallen in love with the different regions. And like I learned like, hey, like there is a proper way to brew coffee. It's not just put it in a filter, put water in, drink it.
Yep.
Like if you do it right, like it is night and day different. And so that's what I gleaned from Starbucks. And I worked back at Starbucks when it was cool to work at Starbucks. Like everybody wanted to work at Starbucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Howard was still walking around. He'd come by
so,
the store.
So that's my experience. Like those are my credentials. So I've got the green apron. I've got the barista badge.
Yeah, he does.
I did have a coffee
That's it.
brand. So
Yeah.
it's not like that. I just don't do caffeine anymore for health reasons, specifically with anxiety and things like that I struggle with. And so I've just nixed caffeine in general with that. But I did have a coffee brand called the Rugged Brew. We served coffee every day at our little mom and pop shop, and I got really into roasters. We partnered with Brick House Coffee Roasters here in Indy.
One of my favorites.
Jared is a very good friend of mine.
Use Brick House.
If you're in Indy, Brick House is
Well,
that's one of my favorites.
Jared and I have been friends since he was not quite as well known as what he is now, and that's where my beans came from is Brick House. Is Jared roasted them for
Their
us. And so
espresso's solid.
it's where my bourbon aged Brazilian came from. We were one of the first to do it.
I just found out the little coffee shop by my house uses Brick House too. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, they're booming. Again, just the love and the story behind Brick House and why it exists. I would encourage you, like, go to your roasters, find out why they exist. Even the guys, Eote that roasts for Chad and Scars and Stripes there in Oklahoma, the story that they have as to why they exist is absolutely incredible, and the amazing things that they are doing behind the scenes for kids and things like that is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So go talk to your roasters, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
I promise you they love to talk about it.
Oh yeah.
So if you ask them, it's not like you're not
Bothering them.
you're not bothering them. They love to talk about it. They live and breathe roasting their beans.
Yes. So Colton, why do we need to listen to you?
Yeah, not really credentials, but I mean, a lot of echoing what Andy said. I love coffee. I drink it, I would say, not every day, but 360 days per year. So my wife was always telling me to cut back, but one of the things I love about it too is I just love trying different coffees. So we're going to talk about some different regions here, and I've had coffee from all of these regions, as I'm sure Andy has.
I'm sure all of us have at this point.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Before I got into cooking too, I love learning different ways to brew coffee, and I'm an accountant by trade, so I can get really into the details on things. And I have very, very specific ways I brew coffee now, with down to X amount of seconds doing this, and this type of filter, and this type of processed bean. But we won't get that detailed on this podcast. But I just in general love coffee, and love to experiment with different ways of brewing it.
Yeah.
Right. So can we just touch on let's just touch on like the major regions, and just a brief overview on each one. So Colton, I'll kind of tee him up, and if you want to just start knocking them down.
Yeah.
We'll start with my personal least favorite is the African region, mainly because of some of the flavor profiles, as you've noted on our sheets here, from Kenya specifically. Like, that's just not my favorite of all of them. But let's talk a little bit about like what to expect. What would you expect from the African region and the different subcategories briefly?
Yeah.
Those.
So the Africa region is where you're going to get a lot more of your sweet florally notes. Specifically, there's one region I want to touch on briefly because it's such an interesting one. So Tanzania is known for their peaberry bean. I don't know if you guys have had a pea berry bean
No.
coffee.
Mm-mm.
I only have one time, and it's hard to find, at least around here. It was one of my favorite coffees I've had. And they're called pea berries because it's I don't know how much those of you listening know about coffee beans, but generally a coffee bean has 2 beans in each coffee plant. So it gives it that kind of non-circular shape. The pea berry bean has just one. So it's got this unique circular shape, and they're smaller. And the notes, when I was just doing some research for this episode, the notes are citrusy and, in quotations, juicy. That's how it's described. And without actually giving y'all some to try, I mean, that is spot on.
Really?
It was a very flavorful, unique coffee, and I would buy it again for sure.
I've struggled with that term juicy. Like a lot of IPAs have like the term juicy describing them, and I just don't understand it. Like, so how can a liquid be juicy?
I love juicy IPAs as well.
I think-
so.
But what is juicy?
I would think so. My mind
Like, does it
instantly
make
goes
your
to
mouth
like
kind of pucker?
filling.
Yeah.
Like I think that's when I think juicy in a liquid. I think it's filling.
Think of it like a dry cider
Yeah,
versus
like a
Yeah.
as a bite.
Yeah.
The word
see
I
that,
would like. It's like when you have a like if you were to eat like a very like ripe orange, and it would like literally like the like sensational or insatiable like quench of
Yes.
a if you ever had quench gum, that's what I'm thinking of. It's like where it's like
Yeah.
it gives you this
So I can
bite
kind of
and
see
then
like
juice
like
and
it's like producing
flavor.
saliva.
Correct.
Like
Yep.
like
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
flavor profiles like, and that's where that.
Right.
I could kind of see that now. I could get behind that.
And like the floral notes and the sweet and the berry notes are some of the ones that this is where you get a lot of fruity coffee. So if you if you're a tea person and you're trying to find coffee, this would probably be a good region for you to maybe play in, because you're going to get a lot of the same profiles.
You'll definitely enjoy the Ethiopian Yogurt for
Yep.
sure.
Dude,
Um,
Ethiopia is like my all-time favorite.
Yeah.
Anything from Ethiopia, I love. That
Especially
citrusy
some
vibes
espresso.
that comes from
Right.
like. We need to talk about like the science behind regions, but that's a whole nother
That's
episode.
all,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, we won't get that
soil,
detailed here.
soil and temperature and
Yeah.
all the things.
So those are the kind of the high notes. Though is you're gonna get a lot of floral, a lot of berry, a lot of bright flavors and things like that. But let's move on to Asia, because I want to get into how we're brewing these things too. So
Yeah. So Asia is probably my least favorite personally. Subregions, India, Indonesia are like the ones you see in stores a lot more earthy flavors, which I like the flavor of them, but these specific regions tend to be dark roasts, and I'm personally not a dark roast fan, which it's a whole nother conversation with light, medium, and dark roasts as well. I don't know how into that we want to get, but
we can touch.
good
Not right
segue to touch right now. Real quick?
We'll do all the flavors first. And
Okay. And then, so Americas is the most diverse region. You get a lot of different profiles, and this is one where a lot of your subcategories are going to actually taste pretty different. So I think, Andy, you mentioned it earlier, Brazil.
Yeah, so my go-to is a Brazilian. I love anything that's got that nutty, rich, low acid. Like I like it to be like chocolate. Like I'm a huge fan of peanut butter. And so a lot of coffees that have some of that nutty, rich taste to it, I'm a big fan of. That's why I tend to like some of the Asian beans as well, because some of them will have a lot of that richer texture. I also love espresso. So when we start talking about dark roast and things like that, this is the profile notes that I like in coffee.
Yeah.
So those are the regions that I like a lot. So if you're looking for, if you feel like coffee makes you feel like it's too acidy, a Brazilian bean would be something I would look at. Also, but if you like one that's oddly, I think it is often noted as fruity, is a Hawaiian bean is another very approachable coffee for someone who's just getting started.
Yeah.
But again, it's another one of those. I feel like it's the best of the fruit profiles, but giving you some of that nutty richness.
Yeah. Hawaii is a good mix.
Yeah. So on this note, real quick, like we'll talk a little bit about food before we get more into coffee. So think about all these different flavor profiles, and think about what you're eating with your coffee. So before I started working at Starbucks, I had a couple other jobs, and I would run through the Starbucks drive through and I would grab a coffee and I would grab a pastry. And some of the pastries just tasted better with certain brews. And some of the pastries just were bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because like those flavor profiles were off.
Mm-hmm.
So like eating, a raspberry flavored scone with like a fruity African coffee, like that's probably going to taste a little bit better than like some other different combinations. So if you've ever had a coffee / pastry like that doesn't taste good, like it's probably because your flavor combinations are off.
And that's a great note too. So we're talking about brewing coffee in this episode, but a lot of us use coffee in cooking as well.
Yeah.
And I specifically make some different rubs and different seasonings with coffee. So thinking about the type of region you're going to put in that seasoning, generally speaking, people may disagree, but the fruitier coffee is probably not great in a seasoning that's going to go on a meat.
Yeah. So you're not just putting coffee in your dish, like you're putting coffee like from this region.
A lot of recipes call for ground coffee. Well, that could mean a lot of different things.
Right.
So.
Oh yeah,
That's a solid point. Yeah, for sure.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's kind of move into brewing methods. If we could.
Sorry
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
cut you off here. We missed my favorite region.
Oh, did we?
A couple.
A couple.
Well,
how many favorites do you have?
Well, so Mexico is another. I personally love it. Lighter, more subtle flavors, rich and sweet. It's got a good. It's not known for being earthy coffee, but the light, subtle, like I get a lot of earthy notes from it. I love that. One of my favorite ones right now is from Mexico, and then Colombia and Costa Rica. Colombia's got that, which you probably like, Andy, that chocolatey, smooth.
Correct.
Colombia's known for
That's what
their
they're known
smooth
for.
coffee.
Yeah.
And that's like the American coffee we talked about. Like we're not Folgers people.
Yeah.
That's a Colombian bean. So you're that's where like again another very approachable way to like get into coffee. That's another solid region that you're
Talking about like grown in America, not like American bots, right? So like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, does any state like in North America grow coffee? Like we don't grow it
Just
up
Hawaii.
here.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So Hawaii grows coffee, so like that qualifies. So it's mostly Mexico, Guatemala, like the Central America region.
The Americas. Yeah.
The Americas.
And Colombia, I think, is the #1 exporter to America.
Yes.
I've actually been to Colombia 5 times, and it's funny when you're there. They grow so much coffee, and nobody there drinks Colombian coffee because it's all exported.
Right.
You can't find the good Colombian coffee in grocery stores because they export it all. Yeah.
Right.
Oh man,
Interesting. Yeah. There's Frank and Katie have a Costa Rican coffee that they love, and they go to Costa Rica quite a bit. And it's like super cheap there. It's like a $5 bag of coffee there. That if you try to buy it here, it's it's a $20, $30 bag of coffee here. But it's everywhere there. But it's interesting.
yeah. We've done a lot of traveling to Guatemala, similar to Colton, and like just coffee is literally everywhere. And I'm dying to go down when they're harvesting all this coffee, and cause I've heard that's quite the experience.
Yeah. That would
But
be
yeah,
awesome.
I've literally got a bag of coffee in my cupboard that a friend grew on their property. Like, so it's super cool. Like kind of tying back to the heirloom recipe, like bringing coffee like from your friends is super.
Well, and that's
super
like
fun,
when I went to Ethiopia, that's what I brought back for all the people that sponsored me and supported me to go over there. That was easy. I think I brought 50 pounds of coffee.
Oh, it's so
of
easy.
Ethiopian Yirgacheffe back.
Dude, every time we go to Guatemala, like we did some missions work and we'd have to bring extra suitcases. And like the extra suitcase would be full of coffee.
I literally left clothes there
So
to
good.
make room for coffee.
Worth it.
Yeah.
So worth it. Well, before we get into brewing methods, are we going to touch on, like, does the brewing method, like where does that start for you guys? So are we going to talk about grinding?
Yes.
Like where does the brewing method start?
Yes. So, well, let's preface the fact with, for each one of these brewing methods, we're going to talk about like how the bean should be ground.
Copy that, yeah.
So, does that make sense? So we're gonna we'll touch on each one of these as we kind of go through.
So
it.
like a
Can
little
I
bit of bean handling
Yeah.
too, like before that.
Can I make one generic comment about
Yeah,
grounding
please.
or grinding? So I think you'll all agree with me. So back to the Okayest Cook ethos, right? If you're someone that just you make coffee, there's not really much to it, and you just want to make better coffee without actually doing anything differently, buy whole beans and
Yep.
grind them yourself.
Correct.
1000%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheat code 1.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
They just stay fresher longer.
Stay fresher, longer. It's kind of like grinding your own like seasonings too. It's
Yeah.
just they preserve better.
Yeah. Well, and you can control the grinding. We'll talk about that as we get into
Well,
to
and
different
they
methods.
say
here.
like when you by the time you open your Folgers can of grounds, it's
how old is that coffee?
right. Well, it's probably gone bad, because it typically grounds are good and fresh for about 7 to 12 days. Is really the number that they say. And I will say I'm getting this information from Jared. So
There's a lot of factors. Yeah, if it's
having a
touched
bean,
oxygen and all this.
having a bean is by far the best way. Cool side note: in Indiana, when I had my business, north of Greenwood, only sold beans. People only would purchase beans. No one would ever buy ground.
Huh. Just like some
South-
regional specific
South of
oddities.
Greenwood, never sold any beans.
Really?
Yep.
That's crazy.
And that's a good plug for, like, we were all talking about local roasters too. You may have a worse, my English is not great here. You may have a worse roasted bean from a local roaster, but it's probably a lot fresher. So it may end up tasting a lot better,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
love it.
Yes. If you're buying coffee from your local grocery store
Yeah.
and it's ground, it's probably been on the shelf longer than the 7 to 10 days.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily going to be, it might still be good, but
It'd be good, but it won't be like
yeah,
Great.
It's like the difference between good and fresh. Like
Yep.
like what are you like? You're missing notes for sure.
Yeah.
That's a great difference. It be the difference between good and fresh.
Right.
That's a good.
exactly.
And we'll talk about some ways to identify if your coffee is actually fresh later on in this episode.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, so let's talk about grinding real quick. So hot tip number 2, you've already bought your beans. Hot tip for me was like grinding the beans properly. So we've got a family friend, Red Rooster Trading Company, who made these like sick coffee mills. I'm in love with this thing. You can dial it down to get super coarse. You can dial it back and get super fine. So buying a good grinder for me was game changing in my coffee making experience.
And to like give people an idea like on price for grinders, there's all sorts of different grinders out there, and again going off the 2 tips there alone was for first hot tip of being that like buy whole beans and grind them yourself. All right, what grinder do I need to get in order to do that?
So there's a couple different styles, right?
Yes.
So like the blade style that just spins and cracks everything open. Definitely cheaper, not ideal, quote unquote, for the really nerdy coffee people. This is a burr grinder, and so it's a cone with and it's just like a literal mill that grinds the coffee. It grinds more evenly, whereas the burr just like annihilates the beans.
Yeah, and they're like $15-$20.
Yeah. I love my Red Rooster Trading Company grinder, and I'm sure they're out of stock right now, but I'm sure hopefully at some point if you pester them.
And the burr grinders are definitely a lot more expensive.
Yes.
They are, but it's one of those things, you get what you pay for. And yeah, if you can only get a cheap grinder that's the blade, work with it. Like you'll learn it.
If you go from a whole bean and using a cheap grinder to grind it, you're gonna get a better,
Still gonna be
fresher
better.
Still
flavor
gonna be fresher,
profile.
And then once you advance to the next level, up your grinder.
Correct.
Yes.
Let's talk about the first brewing method here. We're going to talk a little bit about pour overs. This is Colton's alluded to some of his OCD.
Well, should we start simple and go advanced, or like how do you want to?
Well,
is that how we're doing it?
Yeah, we're starting with. Our pour over is. We can start with we can do this however you want to, buddy. Like if you want to, we were going to go with the pour over first.
Okay.
But the most basic, and we kind of left this out. We had a lot of conversations about this off the air, as it might feel like we're bouncing all over the place.
I'll trust
here.
you.
But
Take it and run.
There are so many different ways to make coffee, and what we're really going to try to focus on today are 4 of the several hundreds of ways of making these. But we're trying to. So we're look, if you have a drip coffee maker, we're not talking about drip coffee makers today. Yeah. So that's not to poo-poo on them. We have them. I have one. There's one right there.
We all have one.
We all have them. We all use them. That is one of the
because
things.
so well the methods we're talking about right now might not necessarily be our daily drink, right?
Right.
I brew 8 cups of coffee in that thing every single day.
Right.
But the methods we're talking about here upcoming are they infinitely taste better.
Infinitely tastes better. And again, like,
but it's more of a process.
In the spirit of like, if we're trying to raise our game here, right?
Yes.
Like, yes. The idea is like, well, here's some fun ways to maybe raise your coffee game.
Absolutely.
You're going to get a better overall flavor and taste out of these coffees. So
just an infinitely better experience.
Right. So let's talk about, so before we go into so pour over is going to be the first category. So Colton, tell us first, like, what is a pour over? What does that mean? There's all different ways of doing that, but like, go ahead and take over the reins and let's talk about what it is first, and then we'll go through the different flavor profile notes, how long it takes to brew, what coffee to water ratios, the grind, what does that need to look like, and then what the equipment cost will be. So we'll cover all of those things. But first off, what does it mean when someone says they're going to get a pour over?
Yeah, so a pour over is probably the most well-known, would you say, alternate method. This is just any method where you're pouring water over your coffee and the water's draining through and extracting that flavor from the grounds as it goes.
The hipsters made it popular.
They did.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
And this is one of those methods where it is, in my opinion, the most it's got the highest customization. You can make it as simple or complex as you would like, which, you know, I'm in the more complex category probably, but there's a lot of different things you can customize in this, you know, from the water temperature to the type of filter you're using, the grind size, the way you pour your water over the beans. But all that to say, all you need is hot water and a filter, and you can make a pour over coffee. It's not hard. All that to say, you know, the time to brew for this one is probably in the middle of the other things we're going to talk about. It's 3 to 5 minutes. It's maybe not as quick as some, but you know, it's still pretty quick. I do this probably half the days of the week. If I need a break from work, it's fun for me, relaxing to just go kind of. It's an art form.
It's
like
a process.
Yeah, exactly. You know, for this one, we're going to talk about, for each of these different brew methods, I guess here's another hot tip before I even say this. So most people that use a drip coffee maker are using like cups of water per grounds. Is it safe to say we all like weigh our coffee here? Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Well, maybe.
Well, you said you do though. You know what you figured out.
Like quantity of beans per.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do.
I don't
You
weigh
just
it.
know it now.
I measure it, but I don't weigh it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I see what
I
you're
weigh my beans, but yes.
So I weigh mine and use an actual like coffee to water ratio, so that like I'm not making the same amount of coffee every time, but I know my ratio, so it's going to turn out the same way. And for pour overs, I use like a 1:14, 1:16 ratio. I say that because I've played with higher and lower. I always do 1:15 these days. It seems.
So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it means if I'm doing 1 gram of coffee, I'm doing 15 grams of water. So
Right.
Yeah.
So those ratios can sometimes work across whatever unit of measurement you want to do, but what you're referring to is grams.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm talking about grams when I do it. Use whatever you'd like.
So get a really
Gallons.
nice like digital scale. You know,
Yeah,
to brew
have
your
a nice
coffee on
little
top of that scale.
digital, you know, any digital kitchen scale will have the grams.
Yeah.
Because you'll want something that can start small.
Yeah.
And it's the same concept as like baking too. Like any legitimate baker will tell you to weigh all of your ingredients, not measure them with like a measuring cup. So
Way more precise.
yeah. You know, for a pour over, you want your water temperature to be between 200 and 205. There's a lot of people that, and I say that generically as just, you call it like just under boiling. There's a lot of people that either just pour boiling water over their grounds, which changes the flavor because it burns your grounds. So staying under that, but then not going too low to where
It's not extracting.
yeah, you're not extracting fully and you end up with a cold cup of coffee.
I think anything under like 215, 220, because I think 220 is where it actually starts to scorch the bean, right?
I don't know.
I think that's what it is.
I just always do 205. I don't know where I got that number from, but the grind for pour over, medium to coarse, a little finer than kosher salt. This is where you get into the grinder importance. Any grinding your own coffee is going to be fresher, no matter what. But then, a burr grinder, like Chris said, you're going to get a more even grind, which is going to turn out a better coffee because you get more even extraction and all that. So, the cost of something like this, you can go as cheap or as expensive you want with the pour over. You can get, something like a V60 for $20. I use a Chemex, depending on the size, 35 to 50. You can literally do a pour over with like a funnel you can pull out of your garage if you want. So, you can kind of make this as whatever you want it to be. Yeah.
Are you an aggressive pourer or are you a circular pourer?
I
have been playing around with that a lot recently. So
I was actually watching something on Instagram, and it was like a side cut. I think you watched it too, of it was explaining that, and I should have sent it to you. I don't know if you're on Instagram yet. I can't remember, but
we saved it in the
that's
the
right.
Okayest.
Yeah. So there's like when you make the circular motion, what it does to the actual coffee inside of the filter and how it changes.
It's fascinating to watch.
It's so cool to see.
Yeah.
So something I tried recently, and I don't know the science behind it, but a different way of pouring. The circular is like the common, I feel like, with Chemex and whatnot. I saw, they call it like a cascading method, where it's a single stream and you go higher up and you high enough to where it creates that like waterfall effect in the coffee. And that was kind of, I don't know if I noticed a difference, but it was fun.
But it's fun to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun to do.
So
that's awesome. No, and again, the takeaways for this, guys, is that like experiment with this, try this. Like the pour over is something that it's a easy implement to add to your coffee brewing setup. There's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of also, it's very forgiving though too.
Yeah.
Again, if follow some of the directions on it, like every single one of them comes with directions on how to properly do it, and you'll find ways to do to create the most the flavor intensity that you really want in your cup of coffee. But I feel like the biggest takeaway with the pour over method is that you're weighing like if you're not weighing your beans. I want to go back to that a little bit there because of the difference between like why the weight matters more than just maybe like how many scoops they put in there. Because going back to your idea of consistency of like that flavor palette that we're talking about there, beans dry out at different rates too. So that's why it's important to weigh them, because yes, you might grind out the same amount of volume on a measuring thing, but that what's in that weighs differently based on the moisture content.
That's true. Yeah.
And I guess something I totally missed on here too is just in general the flavor profile of a Chemex, or not just Chemex but pour over. This is going to be your kind of it's known for having a cleaner taste.
Cleaner.
Specifically because of the filters that you can use too with a Chemex.
And we're just barely scratching the surface on all of these methods. So like we could do a whole episode easy on all of these. So,
for sure.
It goes way, way deeper than we're even touching here.
The whole idea is just like, if you've never played with these, like just giving you some general information about which one of these. I am going to go out of order next because I want to skip the green one and go to the next one because just what you said, the pour over gives you a nice clean taste, but let's talk about the French press because I don't know about you guys, it's still one of my very favorite ways to brew coffee.
It is. I'll say like consistently, I think the pour over gives me like the best flavor, but yeah, French press is like equally.
It's a fun process.
Yeah,
it's a fun process, and it for me, I can make more in my French press than I can just with the pour over.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Colton, tell us about a French press. How does it work? What is it, first of all?
Yeah, so a French press is it's a press. You're essentially soaking your coffee beans in water and then pressing a filter through to push the beans to the bottom of the cup. So because those beans are ground, because the grind is soaking in that water, you just get a much richer, muddier,
if a pour over is clean, a French press is going to feel gritty. You're going to get
literally
gritty. But it's going to be like just intense. So if you like intense flavors, like when we talk about like aging meats and things of that nature, when you do things like that, you get these bold flavors and it's like richness to it. I think that's one of my favorite parts about a French press is that because now the bean is ground much coarser than what you're going to see in a pour over, but you still get a lot of that grit that comes through because you are forcing that filter through it.
And I guess I'll backtrack from my last statement. The French press is probably one of the easier methods here because
I would say so.
I actually didn't really get into doing French press much until last year. My sister-in-law got me one for Christmas. So
And you're like, why not?
I was just so sold on my Chemex. But like if I'm in a rush and I want a good cup of coffee that's going to be quick and easy, French press is what I do.
So brew time, there's like 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's what I do typically, but
3 minutes and 44 seconds is mine.
there you go.
Yeah, it depends on what you do. And I had one other comment that I'll make on French press, but you do this for the Chemex too. But something that I started doing on my French press. So in any sort of pour over, you guys know what a bloom is for your coffee. For those of you who don't, that are listening, before you actually go through your brewing method of coffee, and I'll butcher the science a little bit here, but
You're fine. Okay, it's going to be great.
Yeah. You wet your grounds with some of that warm water before you kind of do your brewing method, and generally leave them there for about 30 seconds. Play with that, but
Kind of like a pre-soak.
and it
Before you add all your water.
allows for greater extraction. So like back to the Chemex, the water's flowing through those grounds quickly, right? Because so you want that coffee flavor to be extracted quicker. So, but I started doing
It's
that.
almost like I've never thought about this until now, but it's like when you water a garden that hasn't been watered in a long time, that water, like a potted plant, if it's very dry, that water just zips right through it.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you water slowly and let it like soak up, like it's going to retain a lot more of that moisture.
That's a good
And
way to think about
I'm
it.
literally like
That's a good
just now making that connection. So like, you're pre-wetting the grind so it like holds, keeps that moisture in the grounds.
And that's where for the French press, I don't know how much it matters because you could just let it sit there longer. But
Sitting
I just
in the water for sure. Yeah.
was playing around with that and started letting my French press bloom a little, and I think I get better flavor
see
out
change.
of it. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So the French press is a great way. Again, let's talk a little bit about just to stay consistent. We've talked about the flavor being a little bit bolder, a little grittier. You are going to get a lot more ground in your coffee mug at the end.
Especially that last little pour.
last sip. The last sip's almost a meal. Brew time is roughly about the same. The coffee to water ratio. This is again one of those things where what I like about the French press is you can kind of tailor this to what you want, because it is in fact soaking. The beans are soaking in that water. If you want it super bold, throw some more coffee in there, friends. If you want a lighter roast because you're trying to calm it down, you can change the flavor profile immensely by playing with that amount. It gives
The quantity of coffee, not necessarily the brew time, correct?
correct.
I mean, kind of both.
Kind of both. But what I'm referring to is the quantity of coffee that you put in it. So it's one of those things where this is something you're going to play with. I think naturally, like when I can't remember what I weigh my grounds out to on a French press, but it's more coffee. It's about the same amount. I would say the ratios are probably fairly close to a pour over. But yeah, play with that. You'll find a certain weight or amount or quantity of scoops, whatever thing you're doing to be consistent with your measurement.
I will say, like in my experience, like it's more beans than you might think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm notoriously shy on beans. Like I don't do a French press a lot, but when I do, like oftentimes like it might be a little on the light side because like when I put the beans in, I'm like, this is a lot of beans.
Yeah.
So put in more than you might think
For
off the bat.
Yeah.
Because like there is a point where like letting your coffee soak longer like won't necessarily make it stronger. Like you can only extract so much out of those beans. And that's why your coffee might be a little weak. So like put in more coffee beans to get a stronger flavor.
Correct.
Not time.
On the equipment side of that, though, and the cost of the equipment, a French press is one of those where you'll see a range, friends. Like you're thinking you'll see a range. We're going to talk about a real range here coming up, but this is one that you'll see on Amazon for $10, but you'll see really fancy, ornate French presses that are, hundreds of dollars. But a good solid French press will run you $20, $30. Yes, it should be glass, usually with a metal container wrapping around with
the plastic ones make me nervous.
The plastic ones make me nervous.
I don't like hot water and plastics and BPAs and all this stuff.
Yeah, microplastics that you're adding to yourself there. So should get yourself a glass one.
Glass and metal.
Glass and metal. But another fun little, and it's a very pretty thing, and a lot of kitchens you'll see.
The glass ones especially are fun to watch. Super cool.
To see the beans moving around in there.
Yes.
It's awesome. Okay. Let's go espresso.
Andy, take us away.
Yes. So we're going to take a little bit of a divergent into like difference in beans. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like the difference between coffee beans and espresso beans. And ultimately, espresso and coffee are, you can technically you can use just about anything in an espresso machine that you want to use. You can grind them the same way and you'll get different flavor profiles you want. But espresso is a different type of bean. It's roasted typically a lot longer. It's a darker bean. But that's what gets you that bold flavor. And I don't know if you want to talk to like because Starbucks has arguably made espresso a lot more approachable to a lot of people. But it also, I think, has tainted what people think espresso should taste like.
Only in the realm of sugar drinks. Like when you order a caramel macchiato or a latte or a frappuccino, there's espresso in that most likely. But if you're drinking just a straight shot of espresso or like a Americano, like that's giving you more of that espresso.
Correct. And when I was saying, like, so Starbucks espresso tends to be very bitter. And it's not
a lot of people that just do the straight shots.
And they do it on purpose because they're making coffee drinks with that espresso. And that bitterness mixed with the sweets of the chocolates and things like that is a phenomenal combination. And that's why those drinks are so good. But when you take Starbucks espresso and just have a shot of espresso, like so if you've ever had an opportunity to go to Italy and actually get espresso from an espresso maker there, it's just different. It's a different flavor profile, and it's one of those that unfortunately
it's a different process.
Well,
like England as well. It's like if you order a shot of espresso, you get like a full on cup. Like a 12-ounce cup of espresso.
Right, but if you get a shot of espresso in Italy, it's this little bitty guy.
Same thing
I've
in
never been in
Ethiopia.
Italy,
Same thing in Ethiopia.
It's small, and that's the thing, is that it's supposed to be that way. So the purpose of this episode is to give everyone just a general overview of what these things are, and we could have a whole podcast on just espresso if we wanted to. But typically with espresso, getting back to like the format of the show, the flavor profiles are going to be a lot bolder, right? But if you have espresso and it tastes like sludge, something's wrong. So if you've had espresso and you're like, I don't like it. I don't like espresso. It's too dark for me. I would be willing to bet that maybe you just didn't like that. Either something was off with how it was extracted, or maybe that espresso bean just wasn't your favorite.
There's a lot in the machine. So if the machine's not pulling a correct shot, then like that's going to ruin the whole experience.
And this is one of those things where we talked earlier about like the ratios of water to coffee beans. And if any of the things we talk about with brewing methods today with espresso, this matters so much. If you have too many grounds in your extraction, it will taste different than if you have too little. Like this is something that if you're not measuring, you're not going to get this. It's not going to turn out the way it's supposed to. So on to espresso machines. This is also the one I kind of alluded to this earlier. There is a tremendous cost difference in these machines. So to be completely honest and fair, like my espresso machine is an under $500 machine. It was $490. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great machine. It pulls a nice shot every single time. Is it the most like iridescent with all of the different oil flavor profiles that can come out of there? It's not perfect. But those machines that you were talking about in Italy are $25,000 espresso machines. And yes, you didn't hear that wrong. $25,000 machines that are there. And it's because of the amount of pressure it takes to extract that and to do it consistently over and over and over again, to the point where Starbucks today, I mean, they don't, the baristas aren't even responsible for measuring their beans anymore.
All
the
automated.
machine does all of it for them, and that's why it's a $40,000 espresso machine that's doing that. It's because it's that consistency to make that flavor profile match over and over and over again. So, but with an espresso machine, again, what you're going to get from a flavor note is something that's really rich. It's also one of the most fun things to do because you get this awesome little wand and you get to put the coffee in there and you can tease it and then you can stamp it down and then you have to get a certain product pressure in it. So if you want to nerd out,
and that's an art form
and
by
that's
itself.
an art form in itself. Like I
critically
you know,
important.
it's one of those things where we have an espresso machine in our house, and when I make Krista's latte in the morning, and it took her a long time to where she's now got to a point where she likes her own latte, but she's like, I just can't make it the same way that you do. Like I'm doing exactly what you're doing, but it doesn't taste the same. Like, well, are you though? Like, are you? Is the
quite the
pressure
same.
perfect? Like, you know. So it's one of those machines that it takes a lot of time and practice to do, but it's a lot of fun to learn.
And that's a quick little side note, I guess. Is for those of you that haven't made espresso or don't know what it actually is, right? We talked about pour over, where you're pouring the water over the beans. French press, they're soaking in the water. And espresso, Andy keeps mentioning pressure. It's actually using pressure. This is why these machines get so expensive, but it's using pressure to push that water through the coffee beans. And it, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it breaks off like microscopic pieces of that coffee through that pressure, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And that's why some of these machines that you'll see, especially if you guys do any sort of deep dives on some cool espresso making on Instagram, you'll see these hand pulls that the guys do, and the art of just pulling at a certain pressure amount to make that happen, because too much is too much and too little is not enough. And it's an amazing process. It's exactly that. It is, you're forcing the water through the beans as opposed to the other methods that we've talked about so far.
Well, if you have not had a really good shot of espresso, like go to a local shop. And
ask them.
Find somebody who knows what they're doing, because it is life changing.
It's
good.
And hopefully they'll bring someone out of the back that'll come and pour that for you, because it's one of those things where, like, and if you ever get a chance to go to Italy, and just try it, even if you've never, like, I don't like espresso. Like, when you try it
different.
there, it's different. It's just
creamy. It's delightful.
and that's where I wanted to get to, like,
too strong. It's not too bitter.
Yeah. So the flavor profiles are going to be bolder, but creamy is the word.
Yeah.
One of the things that, like, this is a story from actually a CrossFitter who's really into coffee as well. And when he first got into making espresso, he's like, man, mine just tastes gross. And I would just, like, sling it back. I was doing it just for the energy. And he was, started to get involved and invest, and he couldn't figure it out. And he went and spoke to a local roaster. He's like, I can't figure out what's going on here. And his takeaway, and he's like, well, how many grams are you putting in each pull? And he's like, I don't know, like 17. He goes, back it down to 15. That little bitty adjustment, like, revolutionized the entire taste of the coffee. So, like, that's how precise these things get. We're talking 2 grams, like, that was the difference maker. In getting the perfect pour, perfect pull rather.
Yes. Well, a cheater way to get into espresso is a device called the AeroPress.
Yeah.
Have you guys used this?
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Yes. $20 maybe. Yeah. 30 maybe. I don't know how much. I don't have one, but I've heard amazing things. So, like, a very approachable way to get into espresso, and I've heard, like, awesome things from these very simple devices.
And on the grind for this, so this one's a little different than we talked about from both the pour over and the French press, where the pour over is going to be like that coarse salt, and the French press is going to be a little bit thicker, a little bit grittier than that. This is extremely fine. Extremely fine. Typically, if you have a grinder, it's as fine as your grinder will go, type of fine. So, like, almost dust. They don't like to say it that way, but a lot, like, that would be the more okayest way of kind of defining it, is it's going to be very, very, very fine.
Very fine.
But phenomenal way to make coffee. By far my favorite. I do it almost every single morning. I I made myself an Americano this morning. Cortado is a coffee drink that if you've never tried is a phenomenal one as well.
Yeah.
So
I need to get into the espresso.
yes. So we got to keep rolling here. The last one that we were talking about today is percolators or stovetop. So this is kind of an old school method of making coffee. There's one, if those of you are watching online in the background here.
Yes.
It's a little metal thing you've seen on your grandmother's stovetop. Or Corey.
in Corey's kitchen.
In Corey's kitchen.
Or at a campsite.
At a campsite, yeah. And this is another really interesting contraption, but another one of the cool notes about this, kind of talking about like how the water is processing through the coffee. The water actually starts in the bottom, heat goes through, and it actually it forces the water up through the coffee beans, and then the coffee sits on the top side of that pot. So it's one of those machines where you'll give it another really good, bold flavor profile. Delicious coffee. Some of my favorite coffee comes out of this right here.
This is as close to cowboy coffee as you
Oh,
can
yeah,
get.
for sure.
Well, and it's recycling the water too, right? So you're getting like re-extracting more coffee from the grounds each time it kind of goes up the tube.
Correct. And so it goes up and it spouts through. It's a really fun process to watch.
Yeah.
It's one of those too where the coffee grinds are going to be a lot finer. The coffee to water ratio, this one's kind of interesting because it seems like a lot of coffee for the little bit about water that's actually being used. So these don't tend to be huge. So you're going to get yourself, like my notes here, we have the 1 to 12 ratio, or 3 scoops to 10 to 12 ounces of water, for those of you who are using a scooper at home. But coffee of this round is going to be a little finer. It's going to be kind of between what you would have for a pour over and an espresso shot. It does pull some grit through, so you get a little bit of that coffee flavor, which I enjoy personally. But this is also one of the fun ones because you can find them as cheap as $5 online.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the reason why they get more expensive is just because they get bigger.
Yeah.
So fun tip for that,
Yeah.
when you're for the grinds,
Mhm.
right before, just pop the top off a little bit and just a shot of cold water.
Yeah.
Just a real quick shot of cold water, and it'll drop the grounds to the bottom.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So that the percolator, the stovetop there is just a phenomenal way to make coffee. And again, these are all great. The whole goal of this was to try to expand, like, what are some of these contraptions you've seen? And maybe, if you're a drip coffee guy, no shade being thrown. We all use them, but grab one of these 4 things, grab one of these 4 things. So,
yeah, definitely the drip coffee gets me through the day.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those guys that drinks probably too much coffee. But yeah, if you want like a special cup of coffee with like a really nice dessert, like do one of these.
This is you're sitting down, you're serving a dessert to some friends.
Yes.
It's in the
You're
evening.
making coffee
you're
for
making
somebody
coffee
special.
in the evening. You've got some time to just sit. You're working from home or whatever, and this is the process you can do. I will tell you, I've tried to do the pour over on a serving people basis, and it's difficult. And we actually put a sign up that says this is an experience and it's worth the wait, because it's not a quick process when you have a coffee shop that's only pour overs, because that's all we were only pour overs. And so it's worth the wait because of the experience. It's definitely different process for sure.
Yeah.
And one quick note about the stovetop percolator too is I don't use it a lot at home, but that's a fun one. We all like to hunt here. We go on, deer camp and camping trips and stuff. And that's a fun one to do over the fire.
Yes.
for sure.
Growing up, talked about it in a previous heirloom episode, but fishing trips with my dad and the Boundary Waters, our buddy that would go with him, I would always bring his percolator. And I distinctly remember, first thing in the morning was getting that fire going and cooking up some fish for breakfast and getting the percolator going.
Nice.
I think sometimes people can be intimidated by it,
Yeah.
just because of the grounds that are in it. But if you do it right way and you get that water boiling enough and it's rolling and going and getting that all the flavor in there, and I'm telling you, that shot of cold water at the end is a game changer because it drops those grounds to the bottom of the percolator. And it does make a big difference when you're trying to get that pour out without the grounds.
Yeah.
I always had grounds in mine, but
It's part of the process. Yeah. Well, hopefully this gives you a nice little intro into coffee. Like, definitely explore the regions, figure out what works for you. I'm real curious to see like how we're going to incorporate this into our cooking.
Right.
Colton's going to share a really cool coffee rub. I've got another friend, Adam, who like literally roasts his own beans in a popcorn machine. So I'd love to chat with him, get some videos of his process. Really cool videographer, Adam. My dad uses coffee in his jerky marinade. So like there's a lot of really cool uses that we'll talk about.
Tiramisu is our favorite
Chili.
dessert.
Ooh, there you go. Put in your chili. Yeah,
so my chili recipe.
Yep.
there it is. Well, let's Colton, hit us with this recipe real quick.
Yeah. So this is a recipe I've used to make a rib rub, which it's a really earthy rub, which complements the ribs really well. You could use it on pretty much any pork, steak, whatever. But, you know, it starts out, the three main items in it are, you start out with 2 tablespoons of freshly ground coffee. And this is where we talked about, you know, pick your region, but probably,
what coffee?
You know, Brazil or Mexico. Those are the ones I like to go with.
Nice. Right.
2 tablespoons of kosher salt, 2 tablespoons of smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon of ancho chili powder, 1 tablespoon of dark brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of oregano, a teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of onion powder, and a teaspoon of ground black pepper. Little note / tip here is, just like the coffee, grind your peppercorn fresh.
Yes.
Anytime you use pepper, if you grind that fresh, you will notice a significant difference. And then a half teaspoon of cocoa powder, half teaspoon of coriander, and that's it. Mix it all together, put on your ribs. It's an earthier taste, so it pairs well with, like, if you do barbecue sauce on your ribs. I'm not a sauce guy, so I stay plain, but
Like them dry, huh?
Yeah, I do like them dry, especially with this rub.
Nice.
You know, pair it with a stout barbecue sauce, something really rich, earthy. It'll turn out great. So
Sick, yeah.
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, well, like I said, we just barely scratched the tip of the iceberg on.
And this
on
is our
coffee.
longest episode.
Yeah.
It's been a long one. It went fast. Please write in. Yeah, tell us what you think of your coffee. Tell us how you make your coffee. Tell us where you like your coffee from. Write into hello@okayestcook.com. Find us on all the socials. If you really want to nerd out on all these topics, we will nerd out.
For sure.
Send us a note and we'll tell you like all the things about the pour over, all the things about the espresso. So until we dive deeper into coffee, that'll be it for now. And thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next week. Cool. I thought you were going to make us some coffee for this episode.
Should have. I could use another cup.
Yeah.
I should have just jumped in the back and started making some tea.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I
we
did
need
not
to
realize how long that was.
we need to do one of these in the morning,
Man,
at some
Because
point.
I felt like we
There's
could
so
have
much to
talked
talk
a lot
about.
longer.
So much to talk about.
It went so fast. Yes. There will be more coffee talk.